Daniel didn't plan for it. He told himself that over and over as if repetition would wash away the weight. But something had shifted, and it wasn't going back. The tension between them had grown so quietly that by the time it became undeniable, it felt natural. Rosa didn't act differently, but Daniel could feel it in every glance she held, every pause when she passed near him. There was a wordless rhythm forming, unspoken but loud. He found her one afternoon in the hallway. Neither of them moved aside immediately. Their eyes locked for a second too long, and she didn't look away. Daniel's breath caught. He should have stepped past her. He didn't. She tilted her head, waiting, calm, unreadable. He felt the heat in his chest rise before she finally broke the tension with a quiet sentence. "You don't have to keep pretending." He didn't respond. There was no script for this, no defense, no plan. She was standing close enough now for him to notice the scent of her clothes, clean cotton, faint soap. She reached out, fingers grazing his wrist, and held. It just long enough to make her point clear. There was no resistance in him, just the slow surrender to something already decided. When their lips met, it wasn't rushed or rough. It was slow, deliberate, built from days of quiet tension and a single shared memory neither had spoken of. The touch didn't feel stolen. It felt inevitable. Her hands moved to his chest, his to her back. There was no urgency, just release, a surrender to something neither had the strength or desire to stop. It wasn't passion. It wasn't lust. It was something deeper, an aching need to be acknowledged, to feel real again. Every touch, every breath between them filled a space that had been hollow for far too long. He didn't think of Clara, not even once, and that was the part that struck him hardest. When it was over, she adjusted her shirt quietly, not looking at him. He stood frozen, heart racing, mouth dry. She didn't speak, didn't wait for questions or guilt. She turned and walked away, calm and steady, like the moment had been waiting on the edge of them all along. Daniel sat alone for a long time afterward. He didn't feel proud. He didn't feel ashamed either. What he felt was clarity, an understanding of just how far he'd drifted. Not just from Clara, but from the version of himself that once believed he'd never do something like this. He thought he'd feel regret. But what lingered instead was the memory of being seen, completely, without judgment, without indifference. And now that he'd felt it, even briefly, the emptiness in his marriage seemed more unbearable than ever. Clara returned 2 days later as polished and distant as ever. She barely looked up from her phone when she walked in, asking him if everything had been fine while she was gone. He said yes. She didn't wait for details. There was no change in her tone, no pause to study his face. Whatever weight he carried didn't reach her. She didn't notice, or didn't want to. Rosa remained composed in the days that followed. She avoided eye contact now, not with fear or guilt, but with the calm distance of someone who had already decided something. Her movements became quicker, more professional, stripped of warmth. The silence between her and Daniel no longer felt charged. It felt final. He tried to speak once, just to say something, anything, but she didn't stop what she was doing, and he let the words dissolve before they left his mouth. The morning she left, there was no goodbye. Just her folded uniform left on the edge of the counter and a short note tucked beneath it. "Take care of yourself. I hope you find what you're missing." No name. No explanation, just a soft cut. Daniel stood with the note in his hand longer than he should have. It didn't surprise him, but it still left a hole. Daniel had stopped expecting warmth in his marriage a long time ago. Clara wasn't cruel, just absent in ways that couldn't be measured. She spoke more to her team than to him. She touched her phone more than she touched Daniel had stopped expecting warmth in his marriage a long time ago. Clara wasn't cruel, just absent in ways that couldn't be measured. She spoke more to her team than to him. She touched her phone more than she touched his hand. Conversations were schedules, errands, passive remarks. The love that once existed had been buried beneath routines and long silences, replaced by a cold efficiency that defined their life together. He tried to keep things normal. He cooked, cleaned up after himself, kept his voice calm. But inside, the quiet was becoming unbearable. Each day passed with fewer words exchanged. Even when they were in the same room, the space between them felt endless. She came home late, always tired. Sometimes she'd sit beside him on the couch and scroll through emails. When he tried to talk, her responses were short, distracted. He stopped trying after a while. Rosa had been with them for 4 months. She was polite, soft-spoken, and rarely said more than necessary. Young, maybe mid-20s with an observant stillness. At first, Daniel barely noticed her. But over time, he began to feel the difference in her presence, how she acknowledged him with a subtle nod, how she moved through the house quietly, but attentively how her silence didn't feel empty. It started small. He'd linger in the kitchen a bit longer when she was wiping counters. He noticed how she folded laundry with care, how she always put things back just right. He caught himself watching her once, nothing inappropriate, just observing the calm in her. It felt strange noticing someone again. But it wasn't just about her. It was about how invisible he had become in his own home. Daniel didn't fantasize, not at first. He just felt the absence of intimacy more sharply when Rosa was around. She was present in a way Clara hadn't been for years. That presence became something he looked for, even in passing. He told himself it meant nothing, but the truth was harder to ignore each day. He hated how much he thought about being seen. Not admired, just acknowledged. Clara hadn't looked at him with real attention in what felt like years. Rosa, on the other hand, noticed small things. When he skipped meals, when he left a book open on the couch. She didn't say anything, but he knew she saw it all. He wondered if Rosa could sense how lonely he was. If she saw through the polite nods and empty smiles. The idea made his chest tighten. It wasn't desire that drove him. It was the ache of being untouched, unspoken, too unnoticed. That ache grew slowly, fed by the silence of a marriage that no longer asked or offered anything. He told himself it was harmless, that noticing wasn't betrayal. But he had already started down a path he couldn't name, quietly pulled by something, deeper than lust, something that felt like the need to feel real again. Clara left early that morning for a 3-day retreat. Daniel didn't mind. Her absence had stopped feeling unusual. The house was quiet, like always, but this time the silence felt heavier. Rosa moved through her routine, and Daniel tried to stay out of the way. Still, he couldn't ignore how aware he had become of her presence, how close she felt, even when she wasn't near. That afternoon, Daniel sat in the bedroom. No distractions, no meetings, just a creeping urge he didn't try to fight anymore. It wasn't about pleasure. It was escape, a way to feel something, even if it was fleeting. He closed the door, sat on the edge of the bed, and let go of the weight pressing down on him. He didn't hear the door open. Rosa's voice didn't announce her. Just a sharp inhale, then silence. His heart stopped before he looked up. She stood frozen, one hand on the doorframe, the other holding a towel. Her expression didn't twist in shock or disgust. Her eyes didn't dart away. They held his for a second too long before she stepped back and quietly pulled the door closed. Daniel sat there, still, every muscle locked. Shame came in waves crashing into his chest. He had no words, only heat in his face and a racing heart.